So Mike's favorite cake is the triple coconut cake from Stella Parks. And while I absolutely am happy to make him a cake, it's kind of a pain, so I only make it once a year for Father's Day. Father's Day's coming up, so it's time to make this cake. Now, I love watching baking videos by people who know what they're doing. However, no one is standing in my kitchen handing me perfectly organized ingredients in their perfect amounts in those tiny little ramekins. So, I'm going to make a baking video. It's going to show you what it's actually like to make one of these recipes for a real person who's not a professional baker.
You're going to take a piece of parchment paper about the width of your cake pan and fold it in half. Place your finger in the center of the fold and fold up one side to make a triangle, and then fold the other side to make the corresponding triangle. Take this large triangle and fold it in half, and then fold each corner towards the center. It's kind of like folding a paper airplane. And take your pan, place the point about the center of the pan, and cut along the edge. This will give you a mostly round, almost perfectly sized piece of parchment for the center of your pan. I'm making a 3-layer cake, so I'm going to do this 3 times. Remove the parchment from the bottom of the pan, and then take a stick of butter and rub it all along the bottom and the sides of the pan. This will give the parchment paper and the flour something to stick to. I know it takes a few extra minutes to prep the pans when you really just want to get started baking your cake, but trust me, it is worth it to put in this extra work. Having a cake stick to your pan is no fun. Once everything is buttered, put the parchment paper back in the bottom of the pan and press it down firmly to seal. Now you're going to want to flour your pans. Because I'm making a coconut cake, I'm going to use coconut flour. I take a large scoop of coconut flour and I place it in the middle of one of my pans. And then I'm going to tap off the excess into the next pan that I'm going to prep. I like to use an appropriate flour for the kind of cake that I'm making. So if I'm making chocolate cake, I'll use cocoa powder. If I'm making a yellow cake, I'll use just regular flour. But in this case, coconut flour seems the appropriate way to go. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet is I am actually allergic to coconut, so when I do the final cake, I am going to tap off that excess into a paper towel so that I can dispose of it, as opposed to putting it in my sink, because that way I don't have to wash out the sink as soon as I'm done. First thing I'm going to do is measure out my sugar in preparation for starting to mix the cake. I'm going to add my paddle attachment, then I'm going to add in the baking soda, then I'm going to cream those all together until they're combined well. The coconut oil and the salt. I'm going to go ahead and add my eggs in one at a time, letting them incorporate fully before adding the next one. Of course, I dropped in a shell, as you do. Then I'm going to go ahead and make a flour and coconut flour mixture. Naturally, I started measuring it before I had a bowl to put it in. Get my flour, get my coconut flour, I'm going to sift those together so that they incorporate well. And then I'm going to measure out my coconut milk. Did I remember both cans? Nope. I'm going to mix those in, first some dry ingredients, then some wet ingredients, letting each thing incorporate fully before adding the next. And I'm going to brush off my paddle, scrape down the sides, do one more mixing. Then I'm going to go ahead and pour an approximately equal amount in each of my 3 pans to make my 3 layers. I'm going to smooth those out. It is a pretty thick batter, so you do need to actually smooth it out. It won't self-level. And then we're going to put them in the oven and let them bake. Through the magic of editing, the cakes are now done. I'm going to check them with a toothpick and just make sure that comes out clean and then pull them out of the oven. You do want to be sure and check all of the cake layers just to make sure that nothing cooked unevenly. Now that the cakes are cool, I'm going to go ahead and turn them out. I'm taking a knife and running it along the edge of the pan and turning it over onto a cooling rack. As you can see, since we spent all that time on pan prep, they come out very easily. And if you're wondering if I'm dumping crumbs all over the floor, the answer is yes. Yes, I am. We don't have a dog, so we'll have to sweep those up. Cats are no help cleaning up messes on the floor. While the cakes are cooling, we're going to go ahead and make our frosting. I'm going to measure out the sugar. And of course, I ran out in that bag, so I had to open a new one. The bag is quite heavy, it's about 6 pounds, so instead of pouring and dumping it all over the counter, I'm just going to spoon it out until I get to the right amount. This is a cooked frosting, so we're going to heat the sugar with the eggs and a few other things prior to whipping them with the butter. We're going to add in some salt, a little cream of tartar, and of course our egg whites. I'm going to set up a 3-bowl system, 1 bowl for the egg whites, 1 bowl for the egg yolks, and then 1 cup that I use to separate the 2. I know that there are plenty of people out there that will judge me for using an egg separator when I could just use the eggshells themselves, but this really does reduce my anxiety and make life so much easier. I'm willing to take the criticism. Once we've got everything in there, we're going to heat them up on the stove. I'm using a double boiler, so I've got a pan with water that's if not actually boiling, pretty close to boiling, and then I'm just going to heat the egg sugar mixture until it gets to the appropriate temperature. You do want to stir this the entire time you're doing it to prevent scorching and help all of the sugar dissolve properly. I'm just using a thermometer to check my temperature regularly to keep an eye on it, because once I get up to temperature, then I'm going to take it off the stove and take it over to my mixer and go ahead and whip them up. It does take about 10 minutes to get the sugar and egg mixture up to temperature on the stove. Starting to finally get there. Once we've reached our temperature, we're going to take our sugar and egg mixture over to our stand mixer and whisk it. If you feel the bottom of your mixer at this point, it'll be extremely hot. What you're looking for is, as you mix air into the sugar and the eggs, it's going to lighten in color, and the bottom of the bowl is actually going to really cool down. You'll be able to touch it quite easily, and once it feels about the temperature of your hand, that's when we're going to go ahead and add in the butter. Once it is cool enough, we're going to take our stick of butter and slice it into approximately tablespoon squares and add each tablespoon of butter individually and allow it to fully incorporate before we add in the next tablespoon of butter. This process does take a little while. Once you've got all of your butter added in, then you're going to go ahead and add in your coconut oil. Don't do what I did. I put my coconut oil in the fridge. I don't know what I was thinking, but that made it very difficult, if not impossible, to fully incorporate. So do make sure that your butter and your coconut oil are as close to room temperature as you can get them. Once all of the butter and the coconut oil are fully incorporated, go ahead and add in your vanilla. You're going to go ahead and scrape down the sides of the bowl. Just make sure that everything is fully incorporated. Once everything is completely incorporated, you're going to want to take the temperature of your frosting just to make sure that you have got it all the way cooled down and it is cool enough to use, but not so warm that it's difficult to frost your cake. It, of course, would be helpful if I'd actually centered the foil on the cake stand before I pressed it firmly and folded over the edges. I'm going to take a cake round and put it in the middle of my cake stand, and then I'm going to take a tiny dollop of frosting and put it in the middle of my cake round, and this will help my first layer of cake not slide around when I am frosting. Normally, at this point, you would also level your cake cut off the domed top, but these layers came out so flat that I didn't need to do that. So I'm just going to put some frosting in between each layer. Normally you would also do a crumb coat, but in this case I wasn't having any issues with crumbs coming off the cake, and I'm going to cover this cake in an enrobing of caramelized white chocolate as well as toasted coconut, so I just need the frosting to be on the cake. It doesn't need to be perfect. I have to confess, I was really happy I was able to get the cake in the fridge. While our cake is chilling in the fridge, I'm going to prepare our white chocolate for the caramelization process. You can actually buy caramelized white chocolate, but it tends to be rather expensive, so I generally make my own. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is cut up the white chocolate. It was quite a warm day, so it was very easy to cut, but normally it's cooler and a lot more difficult. I find it easiest to cut on the diagonal, and as a bonus you get these pretty little diamond-like pieces. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that for each of the 4 chocolate bars that I am using, and then get them in the oven. We're going to place our chocolate pieces in an oven-safe dish and then put them in the oven at a low temperature, around 250, and stir about every 10 to 15 minutes or so until you reach your desired color. As you go, the white chocolate will begin to lose its super sweet flavor and start to develop more complex toffee type flavors. It's really very good. I do highly recommend it. Over time, you'll notice, depending upon your chocolate, mine got a little bit granular as I continued to heat it and mix it up. That's okay. We're going to be straining it later, so any pieces that don't remelt will just strain out. Once I took the white chocolate out of the oven, I did put it in a glass bowl and set it aside, and then I mixed half heavy cream and half coconut milk. You can use all heavy cream or all coconut milk. It is completely your choice. I put those in a pot and I heated them on the stove. I didn't stir anything, just gave it a little shake once in a while. Once it started to bubble, I poured it over the caramelized white chocolate and stirred until it was as smooth as I could get it, and then I strained out any solids. Our final step before decorating the cake is to toast some coconut. I put some sweetened coconut on a foil-lined baking sheet and put it in the oven for about 10 minutes on about 325. You'll note that I broke up a lot of the chunks, but I didn't make it perfectly smooth, and I did not stir while it was in the oven. This allows some pieces to be darker and some pieces to be lighter, and it gives a really pretty effect on the cake. I definitely stole this from Stella. She does this and it looks phenomenal. To prepare to enrobe the cake, I took an extra wide, heavy-duty sheet of foil and completely covered my sheet pan in an effort to control the mess. Once I had all of my edges completely secured, then I took a cooling rack and placed it on top to give the cake a little bit of elevation while I'm pouring the white chocolate. And Now for the second most frightening thing you have to do, and that's moving the cake over to your prepared sheet tray for the enrobing. I just removed a little bit of the frosting that was stuck to the bottom and then placed it gently in the center of my prepared pan. And now it's time for the enrobing. I confess I have made this cake without doing this step. And as I've never had the cake, I only have other people's word for it, but I am told that it does actually really impact the flavor of the cake. You want to just pour nice and slow around the edges. The crisper your edges, actually the easier it will fall over the edge and completely cover the side of the cake. You did make a lot of this if you used all 4 bars of white chocolate, so just keep going. The excess will collect in the pan, and I know Mike likes to use that. I scoop it all up and put it in a container, and then he puts it on ice cream. Now we're going to add our toasted coconut flakes. I just go through and break up any large chunks or pieces before gently sprinkling on top of the cake. And then for the sides of the cake, I sort of cup it in my hand a little bit and then gently press it on the sides. Now, odds are if you're filming this, guaranteed the spot you miss is going to be the spot directly in front of the camera. But just keep going all the way around the cake and eventually you'll get back there. And now for the scariest part of this recipe, I'm going to move it back to the cake stand. I very, very gently use my nails to kind of lift up the cake round so that I can slide my hand underneath and very carefully place it back on top of the cake stand. And here's our final cake. Overall, I really like this recipe. Like all Stella Parks recipes I've tried, it does take quite a while to do, but you can break it up across several days rather than trying to do it all in one day. When I do make everything all in the same day, it takes me about 6 to 8 hours depending upon the ambient temperature and how long it takes things to cool to room temperature. As for taste, as I said, I am allergic to coconut, so I've never actually had any component of this cake, but I am told by everyone I've ever given a slice to that it's quite good. The cake is denser than you would get out of a box, but still very flavorful with a good crumb. You do need to keep the cake refrigerated, especially if it's warm and humid. If people will be eating it after dinner, I usually take it out of the fridge at the start of dinner to let it warm up a bit to make cutting easier. Overall, I have a recipe and think you should give it a try. I did want to show a slice of the cake. A trick in slicing the cake: if you make your first slice the width of your cake cutter, it will come out much, much easier. I know everyone says they want a tiny piece, but give this to the person that wants the big piece. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing.